how I came to be in Lewisham. So, goodness me, it was also bound up with being a midwife. And so in the 70s, I'd actually spent a couple of years working as a nurse in Bangladesh. And when I came back from Bangladesh, I had at that point, I was a general nurse and a paediatric nurse. But I thought, I will want to go away again in the future, and I will need to be a midwife next time. So after Bangladesh, I found myself living in the countryside in Oxfordshire near my sister, and really it was so difficult. And I got to the point, if I see another cow, I'll go mad. And then I heard about what was happening in Lewisham. There were the Lewisham riots, and there were people standing up to racism, and I thought, yeah, that's where I need to be. I was part of the anti-Nazi League, but, in my very conservative area in Oxfordshire, I think there was 3 of us, I remember. So I was probably the chair and the treasurer and anything else. So Lewisham seemed like a really good place. And, having a look, certainly not Googling it in those days, but I did realise that there was a hospital in Lewisham and that they trained midwives. So it seemed pretty obvious. And so I came to Lewisham. Let me think. I think it was 1980. Or it could have been 79. And I came and joined, I think there was 6 of us in my midwifery group. And what I really liked about the hospital, as well as Lewisham, was its cultural diversity. So I felt really at home, that this was a place where you could be whoever. And even though I'm a white woman, I feel much more comfortable in a place that, welcomes everybody. And certainly there was that feel in the hospital. However, because of where we are in time and the place, sure, I saw as much racism in the hospital as anywhere else. It would have been very strange if that hadn't have been. But I was still, I never doubted that I was supposed to be here. So my memories of training in the hospital, it was very exciting. I had the idea that midwifery was going to be a celebration of life. And I thought it would be, I just spent a year in Oxfordshire working pain unit. So working with a lot of people with terminal cancer. And so I thought midwifery would be very different. And it was a bit of a shock to find that it wasn't always so. But getting into it, meeting the sort of people, there were people who inspired me. And I loved being with mothers and babies and dads. And while I was training, I got to be part of a very new organisation called Radical Midwives, and which was, I think probably still is, a bit of a Marmite organisation. Some people welcomed it with open arms, other people felt rather threatened by it. And certainly that was my experience and also I was a student, so it was very much, as a student, challenging people that had been qualified for many, many years. Was an interesting experience. And I have memories of resisting doing episiotomies, resisting doing shaves and enemas, and talking to women about their rights, and that wasn't really encouraged. So that was, that took a little bit of courage, and it led to some funny things. But also, it was good, and I do remember people, some people who had been qualified for a long time, then were really interested to hear that actually this could be done another way. And so it wasn't all confrontational. some things were quite funny in the confrontation. At that time, the active birth movement and the work of Le Boyer was really at the forefront, and this thing about babies being in bed with their mums for bonding. And I remember on the postnatal ward, at night, I'd go around sort of, tucking babies in with their mums, and then the next midwife would come and take all the babies out, and then I'd come and put them back in again. And so there was this sort of pantomime during the night and I really felt for the babies being in a nursery with the lights on. I found that quite painful. But anyway, and the other thing that, I have to smile about now, when I was working in the antenatal clinic, women coming in for blood tests, and they're actually very important blood tests to see if there's any abnormality or potential abnormality of the baby. And the women weren't being told what the blood tests were for. And there would be long queues of women waiting to be processed before having their blood taken. And I would be taking my time explaining what all these tests were going to be for, and it might have repercussions on But it meant that the queue went on and on and on, and that was a bit of trouble, but it was good, and it was an important phase. And I mean, the very thing about being a midwife and bringing those, babies into the world and, empowering women. So I mean, when I started midwifery, it was just like, delivering babies. And I remember the first delivery I ever saw. I thought, I cannot believe women have been doing this all this time. How come? We don't know. I remember my jaw just dropping, watching. I was very lucky because I saw a very normal delivery. That was my very first one. But I thought, oh my God, this is immense. And the privilege of being there. I mean, I as I just remember it, I'm moved with the memory, and seeing women holding their babies for the first time, and seeing the fathers being with their babies. And I think because of what I was doing, and with the encouragement of radical midwives, really coming to see how childbirth, I mean, I came to regard it as almost a political act, and it was an opportunity for empowering women in a way that they might not have been empowered before, and how important it was through that experience to give them a voice for who they were. And it became very important, not just the bonding of baby and mother, but I became really aware of the importance of bonding between baby and father, and also bonding between mother and father. And, I would then really be very mindful of this incredibly important time that could make or break a relationship as well. So it became incredibly important, and how the midwife is in that the midwife is not the most important person, but a facilitator of this miracle. And
did it inspire you in terms of having your own family?
No.
Okay.
First of all, I thought, oh God, this looks very painful. And I think the work itself was nourishing me. And I was giving as much as I could emotionally. I was a very committed. And once again, this got me into trouble, because if I went through a labour with a mother, and you know, it looked as though the birth was coming in the next few hours, and people would be saying, "Oh, it's time for you to go home." I was saying, "No way," you know, because I have always believed in continuity of care. You know, you stay. It doesn't matter if you don't go home till the middle of the night. And that wasn't very popular either. So, but it was quite popular with the mothers and the fathers. Didn't ask the babies, but it didn't inspire me. I still felt that, no, I felt nurtured enough by my work. I was very committed in the work that I did. And it's really funny because just talking about it out loud just brings so much back. And I did my stint at Lewisham Hospital, and it didn't feel like the best place to have a baby, I'll be perfectly honest. And there was some definite misogynistic views around, and sometimes it was quite painful. And at that time, there was a book put out by Sheila Kitzinger called The Good Birth Guide. And Lewisham didn't rate very well in it. But there was a hospital that came out tops, and it's called the West London Hospital, which is no more. So I thought, well, having been at one end, I'll go to the West London. And to be honest, there was hardly any difference. There was hardly any difference at all, which was a bit of a shock. And so, you know, I left Lewisham, so that was up in Hammersmith, although I still kept my little bedsit in Lewisham. So, yeah, I was living in Deptford at the back of the Albany, that is really known for its midwifery service, which I think isn't there anymore, but it was an absolutely brilliant service. And I lived at the back in some a cooperative housing. I mean, I didn't work there, and I think it all sprang up while I was away, because having left Lewisham and then did a few months at the West London, and thinking, oh crumbs, it's all the same, I decided that I would leave the country. I've always been one for big statements. So I went and worked in South America as a midwife for 3 years, and found them still with the same terrible attitudes. Yeah. But then while I was in Bolivia, I became pregnant, thought about it, and I think I'd have been okay having the baby there. I had a really good obstetrician, but their knowledge of sick babies wasn't good, and I thought if my baby wasn't very well, I think I'd want to be back. I looked at, so where in England am I going to go to? And I thought, actually, I want to go back to Lewisham, because I know that Lewisham has got good services. So this was 1984. So I thought this would be a good place to bring a baby into the world. And I'm afraid I still didn't want to have my baby at Lewisham Hospital. And I had decided that I would have a home birth. I felt that was going to be the safest way. In the event I didn't. But the day before he was born, we found he was breech. So I actually, all my politics went to the wall, and I had a private delivery in a centre where I had him naturally, so he actually had a very nice birth.
I remember you saying that you used all your savings for that.
Well, yeah, we didn't have much, and it certainly didn't cover. But, you know, when we told the obstetrician that I'd been working as a volunteer in South America as a midwife, he just said, well, give what you want. So, yeah, we gave it. And, yeah, it wasn't lost on me that, yeah, politically, having, you know, a private delivery wasn't, you know, what I'd ever thought of. But I wanted my baby to have the best, and I think he did have the best. And the obstetrician was lovely, and I was very grateful. We were all so homeless at that time. We were living in, you know, a room in somebody's house, and yeah, it wasn't good. It was luxury going to this place for one night. I could have stayed there. But anyway, we came back to Lewisham and enjoyed what Lewisham had to offer. I mean, in those days, they had something called a baby gym, which, because my partner at that time, well, we got married very quickly while I was pregnant, in Lewisham, yeah. Next door to Lewisham Hospital, we got married in the registry office. Yes, all of these connections weren't lost on me. But I quickly became a single parent. And there were lots of things that were available for me. We would go off to the baby gym. We also had free swimming. We had a wonderful, it was called Friendly Gardens playgroup. So, yeah, went there. And, yeah, we had all this free care and, you know, a thriving library, which isn't, you know, not working now. And we had so much that really contributed to my son having such a good start, even though, you know, for a long time I was on benefits. He really benefited from what Lewisham gave. And even when he was small, we went to lots of free activities in the summer. I remember when he was 6, going to circus workshops in Ladywell Fields, where he decided he'd be an actor. Oh, and actually, that reminds me, yeah, going for a discount to when he was 8 at Lewisham Theatre. There was an amateur production of Oliver. And that's when Toby came out and said, this is what I'm going to be doing. Well, I stopped being a midwife when I was pregnant. And it was tough being a midwife in Bolivia. It was tough for me being a midwife anywhere, I think. There's always been this tension between midwives and obstetricians, and not all, but a lot. And so when I came back from Bolivia, it was like, well, what on earth am I going to do now? A single parent, on benefits, realising that as a single parent I couldn't go back to nursing or midwifery because I didn't have family support. I didn't, you know, so what was I going to do with a baby? So I was a childminder for 5 years, registered with Lewisham. So I was a proper paid up childminder and benefited from training and courses from Lewisham. And I really enjoyed being a childminder and, you know, for local families. And so I had a lot of children that came through my hands, and yeah, I'm still tracing some of them. And, so I did that for 5 years. Then I retrained to be a social worker, then worked mainly in Greenwich. I did work for a little while at an assessment centre in Lewisham, just for 6 months, looking at some of the tougher cases that were going through court. And then about 9 years ago, I retired. I had to retire early because I was ill and not getting any better and couldn't continue, which was a real sadness for me. I was then a social worker and a play therapist working with children in care. Some of them were placed in Lewisham. So I got better, and my own spiritual journey really developed. Decided to become a nun. I'm a Buddhist. Soon after that, getting over my illness, thinking, what do I want to do? Feeling this love for Lewisham and thinking I want to give something back. And because of my background, you know, once in the NHS, you're always in the NHS. My admiration and my love for the NHS. Yeah, I know that people who work for the NHS will feel it, even if they despair of it. And I thought the only thing I've really got to offer anymore is about who I am and what I am now. And so I teach meditation. I thought maybe I have some skills that I can offer to my local hospital. And so back to Lewisham, was interviewed and joined the chaplaincy department at Lewisham Hospital. And that was nearly 7 years ago. So some of that time on the wards, I found it quite interesting that as a chaplain, I became more and more drawn to wanting to support staff even more than patients, really feeling the struggle that staff are having. Just wanted to make myself available under the guise of teaching meditation, but it expanded and actually developed during the pandemic. So because of my age and everything, first of all, we weren't allowed to go back into the hospital. So what I did was I put myself forward on the well-being thing to have online work. And in actual fact, I've done far more work by not going into the hospital than I did there. So by being online, I've been able to offer support to staff at a time that was okay for them, instead of it just being for 2 or 3 hours once a week. I see somebody online at 7:30 in the morning before she goes to work, and then somebody at the end. And so that's been, all through the pandemic. And now I'm going back into the hospital because of the healing garden. And so that's yet another phase. And being able to bring, all my experiences of knowing what it's like to be a staff member and how hard it is. So what I love is being able to support Lewisham Hospital employees. That really brings me a lot of pleasure. It's been a wonderful opportunity because, it's led me into lots of memories.